This is CheloniaCast, episode 64. Today we are joined by Dr. Tony Monahan, who is a full-time professor at Queensborough Community College in New York, where he teaches a variety of classes in exercise science and sort of general education. He's a member of the New York Turtle and Tortoise Society, Turtle and Tortoise Preservation Group, Turtle Survive Alliance, and many other groups dedicated to the research and conservation of turtles and tortoises. He's also a world traveler. He's visited many different countries, and I believe all 50 states, in many scenarios in pursuit of turtles. He's also an artist and the founder of Carapace Designs, a group focused on producing. Well, it's Tony's sort of sole kind of endeavor, focused on creating some incredible art using paper structures and sort of other unique mediums. He's got exhibits in at least 5 states in multiple countries. It's just really incredible work. And he's also the author of the book that is hot off the press, the Turtle Lovers Guidebook, that is a great addition to any Chelonian library. So we're really excited to talk to Tony today. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Tony, we ask everybody this at the beginning of each episode to kind of get the ball rolling. What is it that initially got you into turtles and tortoises?
Well, first I want to ask you a question before I answer that. Did you read the introduction of my book?
I did.
And how does it start?
It starts. Oh, I need to refresh myself.
There we go. Got it handy. That's it's good.
Something every turtle lover has to endure over and over again is turtles. Why turtles? Or so what got you into turtles? A lover of dogs, cats, or even horses doesn't ordinarily receive a similar question. Why turtles is usually the first question after one has learned of your preference for these shelled animals. Many responders reflect on a childhood memory, a pet, a zoo visit, or an encounter in the wild, but if we have to endure the question, it should be for a good reason, to raise awareness for these vulnerable animals who have inhabited Earth for 230 million years.
That's good.
That's very well put.
So thank you for the inspiration on that. It is the question that we all get, why turtles? Everybody asks me that same question all the time, so I had to start my book with that. For me, I never had a dog or a cat. When I was 10 years old, my family moved from like the center of the town out to the outskirts of town where they was surrounded by woods, and I discovered wooded areas and ponds and so forth. And I caught my first turtle, a baby painted turtle, which I named Leonardo. Just before the Ninja Turtles came out, and got interested in that stuff pretty much right away. And so it's been that the whole time. I never had a lot of other pets in my life. Been fascinated with them ever since. They are very unique animals with, you recognize a turtle. Everyone knows a turtle when they see one. So.
Right. What? I mean, so this is sort of an interesting perspective. There's something about the turtle field is people come from all different backgrounds, and I mean, you can major in something related to ecology and whatnot and study it directly, or it can fill so many different areas of your life. And your sort of doctorate is in education and kind of a different field, and you've got sort of experience there. And I'm curious how that perspective has sort of informed your interest in turtles and turtle conservation and sort of what unique perspectives that gives you.
Well, education work that I've done, I actually spent 12 years doing special education, and I've taught every grade. I've taught preschool through higher education and even senior citizens education. I really focused on separating my passion for turtles from the education work that I did. And I would say the one benefit of being an educator and liking turtles is like summers off. those kind of things are very beneficial to me. I remember the first time I had a job that they said, okay, well, you're still going to get paid, but you don't have to work in the summer. And that whole summer, it was like, in my canoe with turtles and so forth. So for a while, that separation was in place, and then I was offered to teach stress management at my college. And the key to stress management is doing those things that you really love to do. So I love doing artwork, turtle. I have a singular focus with my art. And I decided, okay, I'm going to work on some stress management project for myself. I bought a nice camera and I started to go to the New York Turtle and Tortoise Society show and take photos of turtles. And I got very interested in doing that. My artwork is very tedious. It takes a long time to create. So I only produce 1 or 2 art pieces a year. So I was looking for something that was a little bit more, a little quicker to produce. So I work really hard and on the photography thing. And again, I have a singular focus. Not taking photos of landscapes or anything else like that, farm equipment. I'm just taking photos of turtles. And with a singular focus, I, kind of hone my skill by taking millions of photos and getting better and better at it. I had some help along the way. But as an expression of stress management, I started to, Google search the best turtle zoos in the US and started to take trips. And that's how that started. Being an educator gave me the opportunity, gave me the time to do those kind of things. My summers were the last couple of years were filled with trips. Every week was a trip somewhere. So it allowed me the opportunity to do this. If I wasn't a teacher and I worked a regular job, I probably wouldn't be able to do this at all.
Right. I mean, that is one thing that's apparent is, the ability to travel a lot, and some people, and you've been fortunate to be able to do that a lot, and just, that makes sense. You can you have 2 different areas that you pull from, and you can support the passion with sort of your profession, I guess. And that's kind of so maybe a distinction that you would sort of make. Well, I'm curious. You talk about the stress management aspect of things, and turtles have a lot of unique attributes about them that sort of long-lived and that sort of thing. And I think a lot of people sort of anthropomorphize and say that they're easygoing, but I'm curious what you think they can teach us about stress management, maybe more abstract and directly.
Yeah, it's very peaceful to go out, especially I really enjoy anything that has an outdoor situation, like an outdoor pond or something like that. And I do have my nature spots. I do have spots that I like to go to that I'm not telling anybody about. I don't think that people should go out into the wild and see them as much there. And I learned a lot about that in my project, the vulnerability of turtles and how rare they are and how endangered they are. So, as a kid, I was kind of dreaming of going to like Finoki and being in a canoe and taking photos of turtles in the wild. But this project made me realize I'd rather take them where they're in an environment where I can see them and leave them alone in the wild. I've done a lot of stuff in the wild. And I always get the impression that I'm bothering these animals. I remember going on a whale watch one time down in Dominican. And after a while, I was like, okay, can we just leave them alone? Let them do their thing. We're chasing them around in this boat. And I felt really bad about that. So I kind of developed all right, I went through my time as a kid catching turtles and things like that. I'd rather just leave them alone and be in the wild and go to the places that you can see them. And I do like them outside. It's peaceful to watch. The indoor places with the glass is a little harder, and especially when there's a packed house, a lot of kids and stuff. You have to have a lot of patience for that. So the things like organizing for me are things that I like to do. I'm big at categorizing and organizing. All my writings before were in educations, and I really like doing things like book chapters because you take complex information, you break it down so that my students can understand. So that kind of stuff is calming and cathartic to me. My artwork is layers and layers and layers of paper. It's very organized. And that's kind of how I like to operate. So my book is kind of like that too. It has a template with various sections, and every site page has all the same elements, so everything is organized in that way. So being organized is stress management for me. Being able to take information and put it in a manageable format that people can see. So yes, seeing the turtles is wonderful. It's great, but also taking the information, synthesizing it down, and putting it into a situation where other people can see it is also calming for myself.
Right. When you talk about the whale watching and the disturbance, I definitely relate to that. In 2018, after working in Madagascar, we went to South Africa for a few days and went on a safari, and it just kind of seemed like the same thing you're describing. It's just, why are we chasing these animals in a car and just trying to find them to see them for no purpose? I just wanted to be on foot out there. It just feels a little bit wrong. There's a lot of things out there that could get you even in the car, but if you're just taking an upper hand to a lot of them, you've got to at least kind of be in their situation if you're going to pursue them. I think on foot, but yeah, that sort of thing. If this just seems like, what's the point? It's kind of interesting. And watching turtles is interesting, and I think you can do it responsibly, but there is some level of, these creatures are wiser than we are, so we've got to respect that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, go ahead.
And that's kind of how I've been operating. I tend to want to just leave them alone and see them where I can see them. Otherwise, I'm not going to be trekking through the woods and things like that. I did that when I was younger. So I was on a Bible Blitz a couple of weeks ago with Peter Warney in Rhode Island, and I just said, look, go ahead, put your waders on, do your thing. I'm the photographer. When you can bring them back to me, I'll take some photos, and then we let them go. So that was my role.
Awesome.
I think we can all respect that. That's a very wise approach to interacting with turtles that I think a lot of people in the public should take.
And you had a previous guest on, Dr. Mitterrand, was it? That was talking about parallel to the bird watching thing, where you can go and see birds in the wild. And I kind of disagree with that, because I don't want anyone to see the places that I have in the wild. I have a place that has 100 spotted turtles. I wouldn't want to bring a group of people there. That's the last thing I would want to do, because those things are endangered, and I don't want to bother them.
Yeah, well, yeah, unlike birds, turtles are obviously a very sought after animal as a trophy and social status in some countries. So it's definitely different.
My book doesn't mention any wild places at all. It's kind of the anti-field guide. Field guide, it is, if you really like turtles, don't go in the wild, don't take them. These are all the places you can go and see them. These are the organizations you can belong to. These are the rescues. These are turtles on social media. These are the projects and programs going on. So it's more of a, you can be active in turtle world, but you don't have to go and take them from the wild. So I think in that way, my book is different and unique. There isn't anything like it. There's a book called Butterflies Through Binoculars that shows you all the places you can go see butterflies. But again, that's kind of in the wild. But there's no book that kind of details all of the places that have turtles and display turtles and support turtles. So I was pretty happy to put together something like that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting niche, and you did it really well. I've read through a good chunk of the book, and it's amazing.
Thank you.
Well, and so you traveled, I mean, a tremendous amount, over 150,000 miles at least for this, and have highlighted 164 plus different institutions where folks can see a minimum of 5 species of turtle, and
Yeah.
I think was the cutoff. And so that's an incredible endeavor. I think we can really kind of jump into this. I'm just curious, I mean, just initially, what out of all of those trips and adventures over effectively 2 years, I think that's kind of
No,
the
it's a
right.
little less than 4 years.
Oh, wow.
Three plus. Yeah.
So even more. Okay.
Yeah.
So significant amount of time. Out of all of those adventures, I mean, which one stands out the most in your head and why?
Well, I do love my first trip. When I declared I was going to do this book, I took a trip to Alabama, and I was still doing things out, but that trip sticks out in my head because since I've been to Alabama like 3 other times since then, I did like that trip, and I started to learn how to organize the driving part. So I go to a place like a zoo, and I'm not looking at the giraffes or the monkeys or anything else. I have a singular focus. I put the blinders on. I'm just going to see the turtles. And when I get my shots, I go, because sometimes I go to 3 or 4 places in one day. So I had that. The 5 rule is called the Steinhardt rule. It's named after the Steinhardt Aquarium in California, in Golden Gate Park. It's a wonderful place, a beautiful place, and I didn't want to exclude it, and they only had 5 species. By extension, the extension of the Steinhardt rule is that they must have clean, naturalistic environments, healthy animals, and a conservation approach. I have been to some places where I determined, no, there's no way I'm putting this place in the book. I don't care how many of these species they have. It's not a clean place. It's not a healthy place. So those places were excluded. I had a trip down to Kansas. And this is an interesting trip. I learned about the Sedgwick County Zoo down in Wichita. And so my plan was to fly into Kansas City and then drive from there. So I was going to go to Kansas City Zoo, drive over to Sedgwick and Wichita, and then turn around and come back. I was doing some deep dive Google searches the day before I left, and I found this place called the Great Plains Nature Center. So I gave them a call. And like, oh yeah, we have turtles, we have more than 5 species, so forth. Come on over and we'll show you around. So that was wonderful. So I did the Kansas City Zoo. I drove down to Wichita. I stopped over at the Great Plains Nature Center, and they gave me the tour. I saw my very first yellow mud turtle there. And they said, well, you got to go to the Kansas Wildlife Exhibit. What's the Kansas Wildlife Exhibit? And it's this big, giant caged area on the edge of a park, a city park. And it's got different sections. And it's all the wild animals of Kansas. And it's behind a pipe and netting. And they had a lot of turtles there. And they actually had an alligator snapper in the pond next to it. And that was really wild. It was wonderful. The next day, I went to the Sedgwick Zoo, and they gave me the grand tour, and they have a lot of turtles there. That is definitely one of my favorite places. And then the Sedgwick County Zoo is also the most popular public place in all of Kansas. So they have over 25 species of turtle there. And during my tour, I think his name is Nate Nelson. He he said, "Have you been to the Emporia Zoo?" I was like, "What's the Emporia Zoo?" So it's halfway between here and Kansas City. So, all right, I'll stop there on my way back. So it's called the David Traylor Zoo of Emporia, and it's one of the smallest zoos in the country. And they had a bunch of turtles, and that was really nice. So I started off with thinking that I was going to go to 2 places. I ended up going to 5 sites in 2 days. And so that led me to think, okay, so if the Emporia Zoo is one of the smallest zoos in the country, what's the smallest zoo in the country? So more Google searches, and I found the Charles Paddock Zoo in California, San Luis Obispo, California. 5 acres. It's one of the smallest zoos. It's according to Google, the smallest zoo in the U.S.
Wow.
And I would call that an outdoor zoo. And there's aquariums and stuff that are one building, obviously, but they have so many turtles there. They had a whole turtle lab. It was amazing. And that was one of my favorite trips, was because they had an association with the San Francisco airport. So any kind of confiscation that they got, all the turtles went to the Charles Paddock Zoo. So they had a lot of exotics. And the director, Alan Baker, I had sent him an email earlier, but he actually came and gave us a tour on Easter Sunday. Showed us all the kids they had. It was wonderful. So that's one of my favorite places. It's a really small zoo, but you have to ask for the tour of the turtle lab, and they'll show you all the stuff they have. But most of the stuff is from confiscations. And so what happens is one thing leads to another. And a lot of times it's word of mouth. I was down in New Mexico. No, I was in Arizona at, I think I saw you at the TSA in Tucson.
Yeah.
Talked with Bob Ashley about his Kirikawa Desert Museum. So I went to go the next day, and the Uber the driver that took me to the airport to get the rental car, he was from Colorado. He told me about Colorado gators. So on my way to go to Kirikawa, I picked up another place and went to Colorado Gators in Alamosa, Colorado, in the middle of nowhere. That place sits on a 2,000-foot deep geothermal pool, which is a constant 87 degrees. So they've got alligators and emus and a whole bunch of turtles and tortoises. That's a wonderful place. And they've got a photo of alligators hanging out in the snow, which I would love to see if I ever got there in the winter time. I actually just revisited them
That's
2 weeks
wild.
ago. So one place leads to another. And so these trips take on a whole life of their own sometimes. The trips that I took were extremely interesting. And as I was saying, sometimes there's some spontaneity involved. You find out something from somebody, and next thing you know, you're heading off to another place. Obviously, the trip, this project requires a lot of organization. And that was something I'm really got good at, is organizing travel. So plane, rental car, hotel stays, and things like that required a lot of work, because it can get very expensive to take extended trips. Most of my trips were 2-day, 1-night trips or 3-day, 2-night trips, involving a lot of multiple airports and a lot of driving. Sometimes I'm driving up to 1,000 miles in a couple of days. So the organization part was a lot of work. I had to make rules. As I mentioned, the Steinhardt rule with the 5 species, I had to make rules all the way through on how to deal with this trip and how to deal with the compiling of the information. So, I was constantly searching for sites. I didn't want to miss anything. When I heard about something, I would go, okay, I'll have to go there. I was at the Iguana Fest in the fall, and Chris Leone was there, and he had just come back from the Disney Animal Kingdom. And I said, well, did they have 5 species? And he listed off like 7 species. And I was like, oh, man, I have to go there. So headed up to Disney's Animal Kingdom a month later, just because I didn't want to exclude a place that is within the parameters of that I set. So, and again, there's places that had 5 or more species that didn't meet the other requirements. So,
Right. And I'm curious, I mean, you mentioned the organizational skills and that sort of thing that came along with that. When you're on the plane to these spots, I mean, are you prepping for what you're going to be doing when you get there, or reading about the turtles you're going to see? I mean, what's going into it on the plane?
on a plane going there, I'm pretty much already prepped for that. I have everything I need. So on the way going there, I'm usually relaxed, and I'll sleep if it's a nighttime flight or something like that. I can sleep on the plane. On the way back, in going through photos, editing the photos takes a lot of time and effort. I always take my photo. I mean, I've said take 200 or 300 photos in a site, and I go through them all. I delete all the blurries, and then I go and pick the best ofs, and I make a best of folder. That's time consuming. From there, I cut it down to like 10, and from the 10, I cut it to 5, and then we send 5 to Russ, to the publisher, and I had to organize those in priority: photo 1, photo 2, photo 3. So a lot of photo work on the way home. I relax and get prepared on the way there. Was as soon as I start taking photos, work has to be done, because especially when I was using the RAW setting for shooting things in RAW, it takes a lot of time to go through. So working on the run the whole time, and charging all my batteries and making sure everything's ready to go. And, so yeah, it also depends on the plane and where I'm going. Going someplace like Hawaii is a whole different thing.
Right.
So 3 separate trips to California as well. So covered, all the California sites in 3 different trips.
Well, I'm curious what the most exciting thing. I mean, some of these adventures, you talk about the ones that are most memorable, but it's not necessarily the most exciting, or potentially, I'm sure there were some maybe harrowing experiences or things that were a little bit kind of stand out in your mind as just being in the situation. I mean, was there anything that was shocking to you, or sort of stands out in your mind in that regard?
I don't really think so. I think there was pretty much just, I don't think I had any harrowing experiences. Again, I'm in zoos and aquariums. I'm not out in the wild.
Yeah, right.
I think that the thing that was exciting to me is when I first started, I had an idea that I wanted to get the visitor's perspective. So I want to say, whatever, if a person comes to this place, this is what they can expect to see. And that didn't always work out, because, you might have a little mud turtle that's not coming out of, his hiding place and things like that. So what started to get exciting is people started to find out about my project. And the first thing I made for my book was the cover. And I made the cover, and I had it put it on a business card. This way I can give people the card and they can see the book right there. And then I started to get invited to the back room, behind the scenes, and yeah, I'll put this out for you to take a photo, and things like that. That was exciting for me, because sometimes you only get one shot of that. How many times am I going to go to Kansas? Those things. So I'm here. I'm thousands of miles away from home. I can't come back tomorrow. So that was a game changer for me when I started to get, private tours and things like that, and pulling out things that might have been hiding so I can take better shots. Uh, Peter and I took a fabulous trip in Louisiana. I started out at the Baton Rouge Zoo, and then we went to the Atelier, um, which is halfway. It's above. What's the name of that city? It's about middle Louisiana, and then we went up to the Alexandria Zoo in Alexandria, Louisiana, and then we cut across to Texas to the Ellen. Oh, it's in here. It's in the book. Ellen.
People can reference. Perfect example. It's I mean, I'm excited to have it just traveling around too. Is
Ellen Trout.
you end up
Ellen Trout Park Zoo.
awesome.
And they had a lot of great turtles, and Robert Jackson was the herpetologist, and he started pulling out all kinds of stuff. And they had found 2 baby elongated tortoises that hatched in the enclosure. That was a surprise. And they had baby radiateds and baby Texas tortoises. He was pulling everything out, and that was really exciting. So the exciting part for me was going to private breeders' homes. These are places that they're not in the book. I'm not giving anybody's address, but I learned a lot from the Wayne Hill, Anthony Pierleone, Chris Leone, Cameron Lamb, Andrew Hermes. I got to go to all their places. Jay Frewer, and that was exciting for me to meet the people that are really doing the breeding, and I think they're doing great things. So that was exciting to visit those places. Wayne Hill has Galapagos tortoises in his yard. That kind of stuff. It's not an average house.
Right. A lot of different collaborations. I mean, the dedication or the contributions acknowledgement list in your book is extensive. I've seen that, and it's really a testament to how networked you were and how much effort went into creating the final product. And when it comes to, I'm sure there were some places that you went where, I mean, you've mentioned one, like the smallest zoo in the world that had a surprising amount of turtles, that sort of thing. Are there any other situations where you didn't expect to see a lot and got there and all of a sudden you're surrounded by a lot of turtles? I mean, were there any places that surprised you in terms of the turtle diversity or what species they had?
I mean, besides Iguanaland, Iguanaland is amazing.
Right.
At this point, over 120 species, more, I'm sure. I think 115 listed in my book. That place is absolutely incredible. And I've been back probably 4 or 5 times since my initial visit. Went there 2 weeks before they officially opened, and Ty and his crew gave me a tour. Peter and I a tour. The other place that always comes back to me that I think is amazing is Zoo Knoxville. That they have plowshare tortoises. They have an extensive Asian collection in their amphibian reptile center. They have a big greenhouse, brand new greenhouse, and they have incredible collection of turtles and tortoises. And of course, Tennessee Aquarium. I've seen about over 70 species there as well, including they have the baby lab, the baby turtle nursery. And saw Bill Hughes there. He's the herpetologist there, and he let me in the back in the turtle nursery and showed me everything so I could take photos. And that was a great experience. And there's one more that I love and I've been to probably 6 times is San Antonio Zoo, San Antonio, Texas. So that's a great place, and I always want to go back there. And Curacao in New Mexico, Zach Hughes gave me a tour of that place, and they have a lot more turtles than I ever expected. A lot of turtles there, but some are behind the scenes, but still. And they have the Bolson tortoise there too.
Right. They have a cool little garden with the Sonoran mud turtles and that nice little stream, and
Yeah,
it's a real
yeah,
great place.
for sure.
Yeah, it's a really interesting place. So I'm curious what kind of patterns you noticed as well. I mean, you're traveling in all these different regions, and I'm sure there's some patterns to. I mean, where are the zoological diversity hotspots for turtles that maybe are a little unanticipated? I think you can kind of assume, okay, the southeastern U.S. is going to have a lot of species, but what were some of the patterns that you noticed?
Well, I expected that, the Western sites are going to have, less turtles, less species. And so I kind of anticipated that. Um, I think that, of course, the Southeast has had a lot of stuff. I've been through Mississippi, Alabama, Texas, Florida Panhandle several times. I noticed that a lot of zoos had some of the same stuff, and things that you would think are really endangered, like some of the most endangered species in the world, like the radiated tortoise. I've seen 42 sites have radiated tortoises. So you tend to see them over and over and over again, but in the wild, they're endangered. So a lot of places have black-breasted leaf turtles, and so you tend to see the same species. And a lot of spotted turtles. They're in my top 10. So you expect certain things like red ears and eastern box turtles and things like that, snapping turtles. But I remember when I saw my first radiated tortoise, I was so excited. And I have to remind myself when I see the 42nd place with a radiated tortoise that this should be exciting as well, because they're special. So in a way, I'm happy that a lot of these turtles are represented in zoos and aquariums, but I have to remind myself that they are, endangered in the wild. So I started to see certain things, koala species, and then there's stuff that I didn't see. I've never seen an Escambia map turtle. I expected to go to Alabama and see an Alabama map turtle. Never saw one. The only time I ever saw an Alabama map turtle was in Denver Zoo. So that's it. The only Alabama map turtle I've ever seen is in Denver. So things like that were weird. Bronx Zoo has over 40 species in several locations, and they mix it up. They change things around. They also have a little nursery that you can see some babies. And so I do like to go there. I've been there many times, and it's always exciting to go. Some zoos are old school, like Smithsonian and Philadelphia, where you just go to one building. It's the reptile building, and it's either right there or maybe outdoors. They have some galops or something. Other zoos, you got to walk all over the place to see things. Brookfield Zoo in Chicago, excuse me. You have to walk to all ends of that zoo to see all the turtles they have. So some things are a little easier than others. And if you're doing 2 or 3 sites in one day, it's more difficult to have to walk 10,000 steps just to see the turtles in one zoo. So that was a challenge. So I prefer the old school where everything's in one building or in the building and then around the building, just for time purposes. I know that some of these places, like San Diego Zoo, you can spend a whole weekend there.
Yeah.
And so there's another one. Most of the turtles and tortoises are in one area, but there's also other places that you got to go to see them.
I can definitely agree with that sentiment. Whenever I go to a zoo, the first thing I look for is a reptile house because that's just the best place. It's just the most efficient way to view the animals that you really want to see when you go to the zoo. Because I think we can all agree that when we go to a zoo, we're kind of keeping an eye out for reptiles over the other animals.
Yeah, and I would always get jealous to see these people riding around on little golf carts. I did get the one Sedgwick County Zoo in Kansas. I did get the golf cart tour, so that's the one time I got to drive around with Nate Nelson, the herpetologist, and to go to different buildings and see
Neat.
things.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. And I assume that in the process of doing this, you met a lot of, that like this is the part that science a lot of times misses is you're so focused on finding patterns and data, that kind of thing, that you miss out on the getting to know the individuals in the study or whatnot. And so you had the unique opportunity. You got to meet a lot of the turtles and tortoises and the personalities of unique individuals that have been at these places. I mean, are there any stories of specific turtles or tortoises that stand out in your mind?
Well, there's at the Charles Paddock Zoo in California, the small zoo. They had a pair of European pond turtles that were. The story was they were building a heliport in Bosnia, and there was a service member there that was a Canadian service member, and then when they unearthed the ground to dig to make this heliport, they found these two European pond turtles. So the guy rescued them, and somehow they ended up at the Charles Paddock Zoo. So I thought that was a pretty cool story.
Nice.
Also, in the Houston Zoo, and I think it's the primary photo on Houston Zoo is Mr. Pickles. He's a radiated tortoise. The oldest resident of the zoo, he's 90 years old, and just became a father for the first time in 1903. So that was a fun story. I did take the time to ask about certain animals and what their name was and what their story was. My site page descriptions are 80 words. So I didn't go over 80 words. I wanted to keep everything very brief. And I continue the story of the site through the captions of the photos. So to have a name of a turtle for me was very important in the story to say in the caption. So I took pride in doing that, asking questions and finding out what was what and how long they've had it and so forth. So not everything had a name, obviously, but there's quite a few turtles in the book that are named.
Awesome.
There's a spot that you stopped at that was pretty interesting to me. That it's the Robert is Here fruit stand, and that's got an interesting story to it. And they had a tortoise centurion that had kind of an interesting story. I don't know if you could speak to that a bit. I was curious about that.
Yeah, Centurion had moved on after a hurricane. They took him away, but he was on the cover of a book called The 8 Great Tortoises of the World, which I have. But the Robert is Here is an interesting story. He was a 6-year-old, and he went to the corner near his house to sell his dad's cucumbers, and he sat there all day and didn't sell a single cucumber. So he came home all upset, and his father spray painted on a piece of plywood, "Robert is Here." And so he came back the next day, and they started selling things. And by the time he was like a teenager, he bought 10 acres right there on the corner, opened up the now it's a world-renowned fruit and vegetable stand. And he opened up a little zoo in the back of the building, which has a turtle pond. He's got sulcatas, and he's got some redfoots, and lots of different turtles and tortoises walking around and swimming around. And it's a cool place it's a unique place. And I wanted to present kind of a variety of places that you can see turtles, and that certainly is one of the places that met the criteria. And you can get some cool fruit, and they make great shakes there. And Robert was a nice guy. I talked to him for a while, and it was a thrill to go there. And so it didn't have to be an official zoo. My categories are zoos, and those include zoo/aquariums, nature centers. Now the nature centers also include living museums, and special. Special are places that specialize in something like alligator farms or serpentariums or reptile places. So those are my 4 categories, and they are indexed in the book with a color, color tab like this on the top. So I try to get a little bit of everything across the country. Nature centers and special places obviously were really cool to go to. The reptile zoos and all the alligator farms have turtles and tortoises and so forth. A couple of serpentariums that I've been to.
And when you were at some of these spots like San Diego Zoo, Zoo Knoxville, a lot of the places that are in the sort of turtle world, I think pretty well known for their conservation efforts and breeding efforts. Did you get to see a lot of hatchling turtles and the actual programs that they're doing?
Yeah, well, Knoxville has a wonderful bog turtle project that they do, propagation project. And so I got to see the baby bog turtles. Actually got to witness some bog turtles mating.
Wow.
And, yeah, right underneath the bog turtle propagation sign.
That's awesome.
And San Diego, we talked to some people, and I was fortunate enough to go behind the scenes and see the Chytra indica babies.
Wow.
And it was an amazing experience. So that was a thrill to see them. I'm fascinated with those things in the first place. I know that Denver has one, but it's behind the scenes. But just to see them is absolutely incredible.
I know that the Camp Lay Echo Center at Lake Champlain also has a really great head starting program for.
And thanks to you, I went there. So that's in the book. I
Yeah.
went out, took a day, and went up to. In fact, that's the last site I went to, the Echo Center.
Yeah, that place is pretty cool. I went there when I was 19, and I did some name dropping, and they actually let me in to see them behind the scenes, and it was such a really cool experience.
Yeah, they have baby spiny soft shells and map turtles also. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Another spot that you visited was you mentioned Texas earlier, but some of the coastal areas, South Padre Island and Sea Turtle Incorporated. Those areas seem interesting. I'm in Houston right now, and I may end up making a trip down there, but I'm just curious what your experience there was like, and if you got to see any nesting sea turtles while you were there.
Yeah, no, I didn't get to see any nesting sea turtles. If you're going down there, you should stop at Corpus Christi, and they have the Texas State Aquarium that's there. And that has at one point, and I'm not sure if they have this now. I had a whole pond of like freshwater turtles, local things. And walking around the pond, they had a Texas tortoise. So every once in a while, you can see the tortoise and the turtle right next to each other. The Texas Diamondback terrapins are down there.
Wow.
At Sea Turtle Incorporated, in any of these places, it all depends on what they have at the time. What do they have for rehab? I went to the Loggerhead Marine Life Aquarium in Florida, and they didn't have any turtles. I said, "Oh, we don't have any turtles." I was like, "Okay, I'll see you later." So it's a crapshoot. Sometimes there are some permanent residents at Sea Turtle Incorporated. They have Camp Ridley, they have Loggerhead, but they also have some three-toed box turtles, and they have some fighters. So they have some other stuff as well. So it's kind of a cool place.
Neat.
So yeah, depends on what any of these rescue places depends on what they have, who they're working on, who they're rehabbing, and obviously the goal is to let them go.
And there's kind of a distinction between, I think you kind of highlighted this, between sea turtle work and freshwater turtle work. Do you think that's a good thing, or should they be more tightly linked?
I think that I actually think that they should be a little bit more tightly linked. I wanted to include as many sea turtle things as I could. Obviously, you're talking about coastal things, and some place like Colorado or whatever doesn't have it. Although there is one place in Scottsdale, Odyssey Aquarium, that has several sea turtles. I do like the sea turtle stuff, and I think it's connected. And I think there should be more sea turtle stuff at TSA and the TTPG. That's my opinion. I mean, they are turtles, and I am crazy about leatherback sea turtles and other sea turtles. I was talking to someone yesterday about going down to Costa Rica to see the Arabata of the olive ridley in September.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to make that a possibility at least.
Well, I've always said, and I've been saying it for a while, and that's like a big mission of this podcast as well, is I've always wanted to bridge the world between sea turtle and freshwater turtle nerds, because like I told you in the car on the way back from Three Palm, there's no room for division and conservation.
Right.
We're all looking for the same goal, and the more united we are, the better.
Yeah. I have experiences with sea turtles. When I was teaching overseas, I was down in Trinidad, and it was April, and I went up to the beach where they had them, and it was really interesting because you had to get a license, you had to get a guide, you had to be on a group with a tour guide to see the nesting, which was fine. I did it. I liked it. You can only have a red light. You couldn't do a flash or anything like that. So I started to ask some questions, and the first question was, well, what's the season like? And they said, well, if you come back in June, they're coming out of the water at 5 p.m. So you can still take photos of them, without using a flash. So I was planning on that. And then I asked the next question is, what about the babies? And they said, oh, well, you come in August and the babies will coming out. So me and my daughter went back in August. This was in 2019. And where the nesting, you had to get the guide and the license and the group and all that. Well, it's just her and I on the beach, just the two of us, fighting off the vultures and taking the sea turtles and helping them into the water. And, it was a wonderful experience. And I want to do that again at some point.
That's beautiful.
I just found it odd that all this protection for the nesting, but nothing for the babies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know where a lot of the division comes from. I mean, you think about early researchers like Archie Carr and such; they were pretty holistic turtle guys. So I think that some of it is, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but regulatory. I mean, you're talking about the ocean and land, and that kind of mandates different regulatory knowledge, and I think that creates some division. And that's going to exist. But I think that, yeah, why there isn't, it is like 97% no overlap. There's like a 3% there,
Yeah.
and that part is pretty interesting to me. It's interesting
Yeah.
to
We all,
explore.
sorry, go ahead.
There's a site it's called the Key West Aquarium in Key West, Florida. And they have, it's all rescues, but they have a green turtle, a hawksbill, a Ridley, a Kemp Ridley, and a loggerhead. So they have 4 types of turtles. And, but they also have terrapins and sliders and box turtles and tortoises. So that's a really cool place where, you know, they have sea turtles and that's one of their main things, but they also have lots of other turtles as well.
Yeah.
And one of the turtles that they have was rescued from the slaughterhouse in 1972 when they passed the Conservation Act, the Wildlife Conservation Act. So it was slated to be, killed for turtle meat, and they rescued him from there, and he's been there the whole time. So he's an old guy, but it's a cool story.
Yeah, it's great.
And his name is Hector the Hawksbill.
Nice. That's
awesome.
great.
You've talked a bit about, you've traveled a lot within the United States for this project, but you've also traveled internationally quite a bit. And before we came on, you were talking about some of your experiences. This is a consistent theme with the person that comes to mind is Dr. Anders Rodin, a medical profession, but in his free time, he would be out in scrubs looking for turtles. And it seems like in sort of your profession, that's a similar story. I don't know if there are any adventures that stand out in your mind with respect to that, or kind of how you manage to fit turtles into that overall, your teaching schedule.
I lived in Brazil. I've been to the Amazon. I've spent a whole week in the Amazon on the Rio Negro. So that was pretty exciting. One day we're on a trip, a boat ride up the Rio Negro. We stopped at a small beach, and lo and behold, at the little beach, a little baby Kodak. It's the real red-faced one. Red-faced Amazon turtle came out of the sand, just hatched. So that was one of the coolest experiences I've ever had. I took a whole bunch of pictures, and not one of them came out. Of course, they were all blurry. But I had the little turtle in my hands, and the guide is like, "Well, why don't you take him home?" I was like, "What? No, kidding me?" I was like, "Dude, we're in the Amazon. I'm not taking any animals from here." So I got to let him go. I got to let him go into the Rio Negro. And the interesting thing about the Rio Negro is it's like the color of root beer. So to watch the little guy swimming into the darkness is really wonderful. And when it meets up with the Amazon, which is in Manaus, a little south of Manaus, southeast, the Amazon is like coffee milk, so there's 2 different color rivers. And to go to the confluence of the rivers, it's really interesting. They run side by side for about 7 miles before they finally mix in. So I got to take a little boat. I took a local ferry with chickens and pigs and stuff, and the locals across the river to see this confluence of the rivers. It was really fascinating. And also to the pink dolphins and stuff were wonderful, and the monkeys and all the wildlife in the Amazon was amazing.
That's
That was
awesome.
one of the highlights of my life was going there. So yeah.
That's awesome. Well, that's somewhere I hope to make it to before I die. I've always wanted to see expanse and nesting.
Yeah, And I'm sure there's programs you can,
Yep.
go and work with there now. Yeah.
That's all. Yeah. And so also and going back to sort of nationally in the process of compiling the Turtle Lovers Guidebook, there were probably some species that you saw that you didn't expect, and maybe some others that were just kind of stand out to you. I'm curious what that was like. Was there any species of turtle you saw where, dang, that's crazy that's here?
Well, yeah, I did mention the Alabama map turtle at Denver Zoo. They also had a Rieman's snakeneck, which I'd never seen before. It's the only time I've ever seen one. So they had several of those, and I was really happy to get a couple good shots of them. So with talking with me, it's stuff that I've never seen before, even never heard of before. I was recently in England and went to a place in up northeast of London called Swallow Aquatics, and they had these Adson's mud turtle, which is very closely related to the Nanis, and they had a few other things that I had never heard of before. We had seen the Algerian Greek tortoises there. They're big. They're like this big, huge. I'd never seen those before, and we don't get them in the United States for sure. And that's got to be the biggest Greek tortoise there is. It's huge. So those are interesting stuff. Anytime I see, I think the hingebacks are really exciting to see, and I think I've seen them all that I know of. But it's always exciting to see hingebacks, and you don't see them. You see Holmes hingebacks a lot, but some of the others not so much. The Arosa is also really interesting. They're big, and the fact that there's so many of those Pelusio species, there's a lot more than I expected, and so to see all those as well. But again, I'm missing, uh, the Scambia map turtle. I've never seen Sabine map turtle. I've seen some at the reptile expos, some babies, but other than that, seeing those as well. And I don't know if I've ever seen a Texas, musk turtle or mud turtle. Some of those mud turtles species that are down in the southeast that are unique to a certain location. I haven't seen any of those either.
Interesting. Still a lot of stuff. Yeah, right. And it is just patterns wise. It's interesting that some of those map turtles you didn't. I totally would expect something on the Florida Panhandle to have an Escambia map turtle or something similar.
Well, photography wise, I have 250 species. A quality photo of 250 species, at least one quality photo.
Yeah, that's incredible. Definitely a testament to the amount of work that went into it. Overall, I mean, what was your favorite state to visit?
Well, I can't get enough of Tennessee. The Nashville Zoo is good. They have a nice collection, but you've got the Knoxville and Tennessee Aquarium. They're right down the highway from each other, a couple hours apart. There's also the Chattanooga Zoo. So I was surprised. I was surprised that Tennessee had such great turtle zoos. I think Knoxville and Tennessee Aquarium are a must for anybody. Both of them are in my top 5 list for sure.
Awesome. And you must have, I mean, you're doing this and talking about going back behind the scenes tours with people, that sort of thing. And a lot of those stories that kind of stand out, we've touched on. I'm curious though, what are some of the most interesting things you learned in the process of this that you didn't know prior to the undertaking?
So this started out as an art project, a photography project, and because I like turtles. I'm not a turtle expert, and a lot of people love turtles, but they're not turtle experts. I'm not a biologist. I'm not a breeder. And when I started the project, I didn't even have a turtle. And right now, I have my daughter's leopard tortoise in the backyard. And we got him a companion, so we have a couple leopard tortoises in the backyard. But what I learned, and I'm looking at it from an artistic perspective. What I learned was the peril that turtles are in, the fact that half of the species are endangered or threatened that I didn't know. So that's a shocking revelation right there. And when I started to learn that stuff is when I decided, okay, I need to put this together in a way that is different and unique, that brings attention to turtles for people, but not in the way that it's a field guide where you can go in the woods and take them. Most turtle books are either natural history books, books on specific turtles or turtles of the world, or my pet turtle book, how to care for turtles in captivity. There's nothing that is kind of in between. Like, okay, you don't have to be an expert to love turtles, but if you love turtles, this book will help you to learn about what's going on. And I took that to heart, and probably my favorite chapter to write was the projects and programs chapter, which includes 66 different conservation type projects. And I wish it could be more. In fact, I'm working on my new book. It's called The World Book of Turtle Conservation. And it's going to conclude some of the same elements. It's going to have some site pages of some of the best zoos in the world to go to, but it's also going to be heavily focused more on the conservation projects that are going on. So it's not a guidebook. It's going to be a little bit bigger than this. But I've already been to the Tokyo Zoo, the Shanghai Zoo, Bangkok Zoo, Trinidad, Costa Rica. So I've been to a lot of places already on my international travels. And I think I'm going to continue this and, travel the world and write about these projects, these conservation projects, with some site pages in between, kind of sprinkled in between. So that's what I learned. Turtles are in trouble and we need to help them.
Well, I can definitely say after reading this book, I think anybody's read this book and say that they're looking forward to the next project that you're putting out.
Yeah, thanks. Just did the whole England thing. I was shocked to find out how much Englanders love tortoises. And they were saying that every neighborhood has at least one house with tortoises. And they have a wonderful fascination for tortoises and to a smaller degree, turtles. A lot of Greek tortoises and Herman's tortoises and so forth. Just did the England thing. Went to the London Zoo and got some backroom access to their breeding of Chinese big-headed turtles, which was wonderful. Was there with Chris and Casey Leone from the Garden State Tortoise, and they had some epic videos from this trip, and they continued on to Corsica, which is one of my go-to places, which I got to get to, is in Corsica, turtle sanctuary. So working on that, putting together some international trips to work on this new book.
Awesome. The other thing too your book is very unique in the sense that for me at least, if there's anyone that expresses interest in turtles, and who knows if they want to do it as a profession or just are kind of interested in them in a more non-expert kind of way. I mean, yours is a great resource that, like you said, it's not a comprehensive overview of everything about their biology. That's an exhausting
Right.
thing that only a select few are going to read. But this is something you could easily give as a gift to someone to inspire them. And it's an active pursuit, right? This isn't just a textbook. It's here's a place, now you go. So it's fulfilling in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I wanted to make a book that was accessible to everyone, especially children. I remember I had Living Turtles of the World when I was a kid, and I just love that book. And it inspires people. Those books that you have as a kid inspires you to have think of possibilities in that field. I wanted to include. I want it to be accessible to the scientists as well. That's why I have my projects and programs chapter. And there's a whole chapter on organizations. I've got societies and foundations and groups and clubs. So I wanted to include a lot of different things. And there's also a rescue for every single state. So,
Yep.
So you can, if you need to adopt or something, there's a rescue center listed for every state. And of course, the chapter on turtles and social media for people that love turtles that maybe they don't want to have them, but they're interested. They can, see some of the YouTube videos or Facebook groups, and including CheloniaCast. It's in that chapter.
Yeah, we appreciate the shout out. That was really cool to see us in the book.
I would watch the CheloniaCast with pen and paper and take notes. For sure, I learned a lot of stuff. And
That's our mission.
Some of the information is directly from you guys, And so I wanted to be inclusive from the perspective of, all right, I'm not an expert, but I'm offering this information to everyone. You might not know a lot about turtles, but if you get this book, maybe you'll learn a few things. So the other thing is, I had a book. Probably the most similar book is called America's Top 100 Zoos and Aquariums. It's out of England, and I got this book, and it's a wonderful book. It really is. And a couple of things that I took from that I wanted to, that were kind of impediments for me. First of all, there was like a lot of words. There's a lot of writing, a whole history of each zoo and so forth. That, very, very small type and a lot of great information, but probably not accessible to everybody. And the other thing is they just did it in alphabetical. So from A to Z. And I felt that I needed to organize mine a little bit better than that, because again, Sedgwick Zoo is under S for Sedgwick and not under K for Kansas, that kind of stuff. So I made a rule called the TM80 rule, which means my descriptions are going to be 80 words. No more than 80 words. Now, some of them got edited down a little bit less, but nothing more than 80 words. It's just a short paragraph of description. And I organized my sites into East, South, Central, and West. And so you can actually kind of line them up and go and they're generally organized in either north to south or east to west. You can follow along if you want to take a road trip. It goes from place to place to place. So I wanted to organize it in that way. So I tried very much to make it as user-friendly as possible. I kept in, there's that whole issue with books that just have the Latin name, scientific name, and not everybody knows the scientific names. So I kept the scientific names in my turtle spotted lists, but for the most part, I used common names, and I had to make a rule for common names as well, and that's called the Rodin rule, which means the first common name listed in Rodin's checklist is going to be the name that I use. So it's Pig Nose and not Fly River, those kind of things, because common names can vary.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to make little rules to follow, and it made it a little easier to organize.
Well, it's definitely a very smart decision to use both the Latin and the common name because, as you say, common names vary, but Latin names don't. So,
Right. I mean,
yeah.
For sure, you had to keep the Latin name. But again, I'm reaching out to kind of more of a mainstream audience.
Well, yeah. Well, that's what I was about to say. Including the Latin name also just really helps learn. I mean, that's how I learned as a kid. Latin names was through reading books, and
Yeah.
so it was something that I was very interested in. So I admire that a lot.
The other challenge I had was turtle identification because not all signage is correct. So I would, anything that I had a question of, especially in the snake neck category and those kind of things, I would ask Chris Hagen. He was very helpful, and some other people, and so the turtle identification Facebook group, and I would try to double check everything so that I had an accurate, label for each photo that I had. And so, sometimes there's no signage at all, and sometimes the signage is wrong or outdated or whatever. So that was a challenge to do that.
Another issue you talked about too is the just the photography aspect. I'll pull up the photo you shared with us. Maybe you can speak to that a bit. But so you can see this here, and I mean,
Yeah,
this sort
so
of
this is at the National Aquarium in Baltimore. And those are some Australian, I think those are red-faced turtles. And this is early on in my adventure. And as you can see, it has all the elements that you have to avoid in photography. It's got scratches, it's got smudges, it's got glare, it's got a reflection of me in the picture. So I had to learn angles and lighting and to wear all black so that I'm not reflecting. And I have black cloths and napkins that I would drape over things to avoid reflections. Any kind of shirt with a logo or anything is going to come through on the reflection. So, I just, learned to just wear all black and make sure that I was at the right angle. I started out with photography. My philosophy was if I take 100 pictures, hopefully a couple of them will come out. And gradually I got better and better at photography. One of the best helpers that I've got from photography was Greg Brashear, who's a professional photographer, and I've had conversations with him about photography. And he helped me out a lot, more than I think he realizes. And I, even as far as selecting a camera and settings and so forth. So I just gathered as much information as I can about photography. And I think that it's a little easier because I only take photos of turtles with my camera. If I go to a wedding or an event, I'm taking photos with my phone. So the camera that I have is for taking photos of turtles, pretty much primarily. And, I have about 20,000 quality photos of 250 species. And it just takes a lot of practice and knowing the lighting and so forth. Certain glares are sometimes a challenge, but it's not impossible.
right. Well, I think maybe this is a good time we can talk about some of your artwork. I mean, we haven't focused on that as much, and you've had kind of from what I understand, you started out more with a painting and then kind of
Yeah.
transitioned into this paper structure. And maybe you can just speak to that a bit. And while you're talking about it, for anyone listening, I'll pull up some images and we can sort of cycle through that.
Okay, yeah. So I did start with painting, painting on canvas, acrylic on canvas. I got my first art commission was at the University of California, Berkeley, and they commissioned me to do a big giant piece, and they wanted an abstract, and I gave them a leatherback sea turtle, just the shell and a little bit of his flippers, and they thought it was an abstract, but I knew, I said someday someone's going to come in and see what this is, and they're going to know what it is. And that did happen. A year later, they called me up and said, "Oh, a marine biologist came by the door, the office, and do it." But I quickly turned to what's called paper structure. It's my own type of artwork, which is layers and layers of paper. I have an extensive collection of paper. I use nuts and bolts. The image here is called Turtles All the Way Down. And that image is on board the OSIRIS-REx space probe, which is out in space, orbiting the asteroid Bennu. It's not quite 1 million miles away, but it's I got artwork in space, so I'm pretty happy about that. I sent it to NASA, it got accepted, and so yeah, I'm pretty happy. I'm one of the few artists that has an art piece that's off-world.
That is a pretty incredible
That's
achievement.
awesome. That's so cool.
This is a piece called the Fibonacci Procession. And it's an entirely mathematical piece. I had to make it following the Fibonacci progression, which is a formula for the spiral. It's 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. And I followed the exact formula to make this. So this piece is 13 by 21. It's built on 7 levels. So there's 7 turtles there. The big one on the left, he's got 35 layers on his shell. So 7 times 5. The next one's 6 times 4. The next one's 5 times 3, and so forth and so on. As far as thickness, and again, nuts and bolts are involved. This one was my first piece that ever made the Newport Art Museum, and it was also written about in Art New England magazine, so I was pretty happy about that.
It's incredible. It's cool that there's so many layers to it too, that you followed the Fibonacci sequence and incorporated that.
Yeah. This one is a special piece for me. It was my 50th piece. It's called Spotted Space, and actually the design was from my daughter. I think she was like 11 or 12 at the time. She drew it out on a piece of paper, and it took me a couple of years to even get around to it, but I put it together, and it's spotted turtles. And I spent a whole summer just cutting out little circles, little yellow circles, white circles, and blue circles. And this piece was on display at a gallery in New York, and it was stolen. So, it's kind of cool that one of my art pieces was stolen, but at the same time, this is a piece that I made for my daughter, and so it's gone. So unfortunately, it was one of my favorite pieces. It was actually on the brochure for the opening of the gallery of the show. It was the featured piece. And again, who knows where it might be.
Yeah, right. You've got a piece of art in space, one that's outstanding. I mean, there's a lot of really, as an artist, that's almost a compliment, right? As you've kind of pointed out.
Yeah, in a way. I was repaid. I was paid by the gallery, but at the same time, I do anything. I wish I had it back. But then
right.
you have to move on. When you do art, you move on to the next piece.
Right. And well, I'm curious too. What prompted you to switch from painting? I mean, this is kind of
Yeah.
the paper structures is kind of a unique approach. I mean, what got you interested in that? Where do you get the inspiration?
So painting is hard, and I'm a lefty, so I got the lefty claw thing going on. So when you're painting, you have to be on your game all the time. You know, uh, with paper structure, I can use both of my hands, and the creative part comes in certain times. So, for example, there always something to be cut out. You know, you can just sit around and watch TV or have conversations around the table and cut stuff out. So whether it be fingernails or scales or circles or leaves or whatever, it doesn't take creativity. It doesn't take skill to just cut stuff out. So if you've got, I've got a piece with a trees and it has like over 700 leaves. So, that's just cutting out leaves all day long. It doesn't take a lot of creativity. So again, it's all about organization. You take in this stuff and you organize it. Before I finish a piece, all the pieces can fit in my pockets. So, for example, this spotted space piece, again, I cut out 1,000 little circles. You put them in little containers, and then when you're ready to put it all together, that's when the creativity comes together, when you're piecing it together. So the creativity for paper structure is in two areas. The first is choosing the papers that you're going to use, selecting the colors and the textures and so forth. And the second is when everything's cut out, just piecing them together and figuring out how they fit. So it's not like painting where you have to be on all the time. And I find it a lot more cathartic to cut things out and, things like that. You have to do it in sequences. It's not like you're going to build one turtle and then go and build another one. You have to build all the parts first, all the scoots, all the scales, all the spots, then the heads, and so forth. This one is a challenging piece. It took me 2 years to make. It's called Interdependence. And it's actually built on x-rays of my bones. If you can see the little blue area in the back, those are x-ray paper,
Wow.
x-ray film. And the challenge of this one, not only was 20 layers of paper on each one of these turtles, but it was, I had to build lighting inside of the frame. So there's a light behind the x-ray to illuminate the x-rays, and then there's also lights on the sides to illuminate the turtles. So that involves some electronics.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And so, is the meaning behind this one effectively that the turtle sort of build up the skeleton, the base? Is that?
Well, that's up to your interpretation. Obviously, people interpret art in different ways. For me, I I get visions in my head, and then I try to make them real. They come to me. All the pieces that I do, most of the pieces, not all of them, most of them come to me, and then I figure out, all right, how do I do this? I have minimal sketches. Sometimes I'll sketch something out on a scrap piece of paper, an envelope or something, and then I try to make it real. And a lot of times, I have pieces in my head I have no idea how to do. I can't, I'm not ready for skill wise or technique wise, or maybe it's a formula that I need to figure out. So the pieces are in my head, and I try to make them so that everyone else can see what I'm looking at. So that's the challenge. Is all right. How do I construct this?
That is awesome. I mean,
That's amazing.
there's no to what you can do with turtles. It's a great example.
All right, so this one is another very challenging piece that I did. And I wanted to make an art piece that a blind person can see easier than a sighted person. So this one's called 81 Squares in Braille. And I got sick a while back. It was in 2002 through 2004. I had a muscle disease for a short time. Anyway, I've recovered since, but I spent a lot of time in the hospital. So the majority of this piece was actually made in a hospital bed. And it's got 10,000 pieces of paper. And what it is if a sighted person that's standing 20 feet away will see an optical illusion. Now, this is an optical illusion that you see on the back of cereal boxes and such, where they're actually parallel squares, but it looks like an undulating pattern. It looks like they're, kind of zigzag. They're not really parallel, but they are. If you want to just scroll to the next. So a sighted person would see an optical illusion, and then you can go one more. Oh, there's one. There should have been another one. That one. Yeah. So on each 2-inch square is a tortoise. I think it's 10 layers made of the exact same paper. So if you're standing far enough away, you won't see the tortoises, but a blind person, if you go back one more, a blind person feeling it with his or her hand will feel the turtles. And so it's a piece of art that a blind person can see easier than a sighted person. Now, this particular picture, the blonde woman in the corner is the TV reporter, and the guy that's touching it is a blind guy. And he's talking, and he says, "It's turtles." So I was behind him, jumping up and down.
Wow.
That's great.
So the pieces was in the Helen Keller National Center in Port Washington, New York.
Wow.
It was in their lobby. So that was a thrill. It was a thrill to have a piece that a blind person can see easier than a sighted person. And again, when you have layers of paper and you have dimensions, you can do stuff like that.
That's awesome, right?
I love
There's so many different ways you can take it. Well, I think
Yeah,
that we
you
can.
can see how long it takes.
Yeah, 10,000 pieces is, I mean, that's incredible. And the amount of time, I mean, how much time goes into an average? I mean, you said you have 50 and 20 plus years. So but how much time goes into an average endeavor?
Yeah, and I'm up to like 60 now, but probably, a couple of months, at least a couple of months. I have done pieces in a week. I've done pieces in a weekend, but some of the bigger pieces will take a long time. I started a piece a long time ago called Circles of Boxes that involves 64 box turtles, and all the shells are made, but I'm still it's one of these pieces that it's going to take me a while to finish. I think that the 81 squares in Braille was very challenging. Again, you have to have a lot of patience to just cut out piece after piece after piece. I did do a piece called Balance, and it is it's a yin yang with a white and a black turtle, and I wanted it to be a representation of perfection. So every single piece that I did with the white turtle, I made the exact same piece with the black turtle, whether it's a scoot or a scale or a fingernail or whatever. So I went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth between the white and the black, so that the two turtles were exact to the point of, you can't tell any deviation between the two. So I had to make each piece one at a time in the white and then in the black. That was challenging. I don't know if I could do that today.
That's amazing, Tony.
Really cool.
Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
As we start to wrap things up, I think that there's one other thing. We haven't talked about this so much, but you've been a member of the New York Turtle and Tortoise Society for a while, and I'm curious a lot of folks have come through there, and who are some of the people that have sort of contributed to that over the years, and what are the memories that stand out the most?
Yeah, I met all these people, Jim Van Abma and Alan and Anita Salzberg. They're always pretty active. I was at the show on um, on Saturday. That was July 29th, I think. Anthony Perleone was the judge. I think it's a great group, and that's how I got my start. I give them all the credit in the world. There's a guy named Frank that always has a lot of cool turtles, and he worked at the Bronx Zoo for a while, so he's retired right now. But he always had some interesting things. Every once in a while you'll see a baby alligator snapper or baby pancakes or things like that. So I was very happy last week to go to their first show in 5 years, because they didn't have a show since COVID hit. So it was their first one. So yeah, that's how it all started. They used to have it in the village schoolyard in Greenwich Village in Manhattan. And that was kind of exciting because all the neighbors, all the people walking by can see. But now they've moved it up to Yonkers, the bigger area with a lawn. So they moved
Nice.
it to a new location.
Very cool.
So I'm curious, so as we start the last few kind of questions we like to ask generally, but in your experience, and I think you can talk to this quite well, is why should people care about turtles? I mean, what is it about turtles?
Well, they fill an important niche in our world. Any animal deserves to live. I think they're the coolest animals ever, with the shell and all their unique. I think that turtles are varied. What is there? 340, 350 different species of turtles now. You just can't do a zebra lover's guidebook. That's not going to work. So they're in a way they're like birds. There's a lot of different species and they're very colorful. And people sometimes they don't realize that. Oh, I thought turtles were just brown, or I thought turtles were just green. Those kind of things. So to raise awareness of the variety of turtles, and they play an important role. Like a gopher tortoise plays an important role in the ecosystem, and the leatherback sea turtle eats jellyfish, and jellyfish eat fish larvae. So, the more jellyfish, the less fish. The more turtles, the less jellyfish, the more fish. Those kind of things, everything is connected. So to learn of the important role that these animals play is really important. Plus, there are a few problems. The red-eared slider is a problem. I was in China, I was in Shanghai, and some of my students said, oh, you got to go to this park with this pond. They have lots of turtles. And I took 2 different trains to get to this place. And I set up my camera and I go to the pond, and they're all red ears. So it was kind of sad to see. I was in an island off of Belize this January, and they had red ears there. So that's a problem.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I lived in Puerto Rico for a little bit, and I just noticed, mainly on the main island, I stayed in Vieques, and the population there was much more genetically pure. But on the main island of Puerto Rico, you can tell that the Puerto Rican sliders are quickly being muddled with the red-eareds, and it's not good at all.
Yeah, I've got a friend that's from Puerto Rico. He's a professor in Rhode Island. He's a biology professor, and he said that there's a couple of dozen Puerto Rican sliders left.
Yep.
Well,
So
yeah,
I think that it's important for people to understand that and recognize that. And through this project, I learned that. So it's sometimes, in my book, in a subtle way, raises awareness. In a more direct way, there's photos with colorful turtles and stuff that people can get interested in. But again, I want to continue this in my new book. The conservation projects are really important, and to people to be understanding about we have trouble with these. Again, and I like I said, never saw an Escambia map turtle, and I was there at a nature center. It was right there. They didn't have him. So to be aware of these situations. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Right. And the Turtle Lovers Guidebook is a tremendous contribution to raising awareness. Yeah.
Agreed. It's a great book. It's very easy to read, which I love my textbooks, but it's just really refreshing to see a book go this in depth that can be read by anybody of any age.
And you can turn to any page.
Yep.
You don't have to. It's not a novel, so you can turn to any page and learn something.
Yeah, it's great, and I'm sure you'll do great with your next book as well. And I'm very excited to see how that turns out.
Thanks. Me too.
Well, sort of as the last question, we like to ask this to everyone because it's super specific to different individuals. And for someone looking to make a career in turtle or tortoise work, I'm curious what kind of advice you have.
I actually think that it seems that turtles are getting more and more popular, and it's on the upswing. At the TTPG last year, they said it was the largest audience that they've ever had, an amount of people that joined that conference. And it seems to be that all these organizations are getting more and more people, more and more interest. So I think that part of this is because of social media, that turtles are becoming more popular. So that's a great thing. So I think this is a good time to get into it, and it's needed. We need a lot of help. And I know, Michael, you went to Madagascar and worked on that big confiscation. And you've been to the Belize project as well.
Going in 4 days. Yeah.
Yeah. So those things are important. And if you get into this field, and if I could go back in time, this is what I would do. There were so many opportunities to travel the world and work on these projects. So this is a good time to do it, and it's needed. It's important.
Nice.
Awesome.
I think we can all agree with that.
Yeah, and we'll take it to heart and for listeners for sure. Well, I mean, I think we can just finish things off with a quick round of turtle trivia.
Oh, Jesus.
I don't know if you've got some.
I've been dreading this
questions.
Yeah.
Did you actually bring that up in the email this time, Michael?
No, I know. I've been watching your.
Okay.
I brought it up. I've added it to the document, so now we've got.
I know all about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Good.
Okay.
All right.
Cool.
I'm not irresponsible.
I have one.
Go ahead.
There's one zoo
Awesome.
that
Well, if you want to throw us a question, see if you can stump us.
All right. There's one U.S. zoo that I've been to that purposefully separate the males and the females because this location is too fertile. Where do you think that is? They can't handle all the babies they get.
Does it happen to have anything to do with radiata by chance?
Not necessarily, but all the turtles and tortoises.
What was the question?
This zoo
too many.
separates
This
males
is
and females
I have
on purpose. They separate them because the location is too fertile.
Are we we're talking about A's?
I'm stumped.
Just trying to think who has the most. I mean, the Turtle Conservancy's got that problem in some areas, but
no, this is a public zoo. Public zoo.
Is it Is it?
Yeah, I
Bill?
can't say. There's so many options.
Wyatt, what'd you say?
Is it the Honolulu Zoo?
You got it. Honolulu Zoo.
Let's go. Nice.
All right. You can ask me one that I'll probably get wrong.
All right. I figured this isn't really turtle and tortoise related, but it is zoo related. How many AZA accredited institutions are there located in North America?
I have no idea, and I specifically didn't identify AZA places because I wanted to be inclusive of all the, sometimes it's a smaller place, and I wanted to be inclusive, and I didn't want to put a restriction on saying, well, this is an AZA and this is not. I wanted to leave that part off. Obviously, all the bigger ones are, I would imagine there's over 100.
Yep, you would be right about that. Michael, do you have a guess?
I'm going to say 173.
You're not super far off. It's 236.
Wow. Yeah.
Cool.
Interesting. Cool. All right. Well, I mean, Tony, if there's anything you'd like to finish off with, we'll open the floor to you.
Oh yeah, just some of the other places that I visited that aren't public per se that were amazing were, the Baylor Center in California, which I just love that place, and the Turtle Survival Center, South Carolina. Some of those places were really fabulous, and I would recommend those places to anybody that's interested in turtles. I wish I lived closer to Los Angeles so I could visit the Baylor Center all the time.
Yeah, I got lucky with that for a while, but not so much anymore. But
yeah, I have a chapter on Assurance Colony, so they are listed there, as well as the Ashton Preserve in Florida, which is another one that I love visiting there. I've been there several times, and also want to give a shout out to Peter Warney, who got me into all this stuff. He was my mentor throughout the process, and we did several trips together. And I saw him yesterday in Connecticut.
I'll see him in about a week and a half.
Right, he's heading down. He's heading down, and I'll hook up with him in Daytona, where I'll be speaking at the Turtle Talk at the Daytona Reptile Expo in August.
Sweet.
Awesome. Yeah, we spoke with him on a past episode at actually live from Ashton with Chase. So that one's coming.
Yeah.
Should be fun.
Right. Yeah.
He's an animated guy, really knowledgeable. Yeah.
Yeah. He's a great guy. And I don't think any of this would be possible without his help and guidance.
Oh.
He's pretty happy.
Awesome.
He's pretty happy with the book.
Awesome. That's great. All right. Well, I think that's a good point to wrap things up.
Great.
Yep, I think so. So we'll close things out. Thanks again for taking the time out of your day to talk with us, and this has been really fun. Yeah.
All right.
All right. We'll see you on the next one.